Hey guys, welcome to the LT Brings the Heat podcast. We're your hosts, Sean Laird and Adam Heisler, where we talk about baseball and sports performance. With topics ranging from coaching, business, and player development, our goal is to bring you a no BS approach to development in baseball and sports performance. Hope you guys enjoy. Let's rock and roll. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of LT Brings the Heat. We're your hosts, Sean Laird and Adam Heisler. It has been a while since we've been on. We had fall break, some hurricane issues, and we kind of got an episode in between the hurricane, and Adam and Mobile kind of got beat up a couple of times. But how's everything going, buddy?
Yeah, everything's going good. Hopefully this hurricane season is officially over with. I hate that you and Lauren and the kiddos got to experience a little bit of it when you're all down in Panama City. It's not a fun thing, but some people say it's the price of you pay when you live on the coast and you want to stay near the beach. So it's got its pros and cons, just like anything else in life. What about you? How's everything going back home now?
Oh, it's going great. We just got back, and we had Halloween the very next day, and that's just, with the three kids, that was an absolute blast. And then we rolled straight into lessons and everything on Sunday. We just started our fall speed camp that leads into winter, which leads into our winter velo program. And so the first day was awesome. We had a great turnout, a lot of guys, and got our baseline test. We're going to do a couple more baseline tests next week, and kind of just, train the crap out of them over the next 2 months and see where they lie at the end. We always are trying to work on increasing vertical, broad jump, lateral jumps, 10-yard sled pushes. We do 10-yard dashes, a lot of things that we like to see, and obviously change the direction training. But we're going to kind of talk about today, obviously, speed and agility. And the big thing with me is I would love to hear your aspect of things, because you've always been a fast guy, but like you said, you went from being fast to like explosive and really fast once you started really, getting in the weight room and training and kind of building on what you're doing. And you're a big hill sprint guy, as am I. But I really think that, when it comes to speed and agility, there's a lot of things that are done wrong. And there's a lot of things that are, people kind of get things that kind of get in vogue and people want to do. They see stuff on social media. And I see stuff all the time, like especially up here in North, because we're in a cold weather state. Guys are spending a lot of time on the treadmill, which the manual treadmill that they can control, working on top end speed. And I'll talk about later why I don't like that. But kind of what are some things that you want to kind of brush on and kind of touch on before we get rolling?
No, definitely. I mean, I think speed and athleticism, we talk about it all the time, is such a big part of this game of baseball. And it's not necessarily, we know we run the 60, but we need to be fast within the first couple of steps. And I think that kind of gets overlooked, because we do, when they come to a showcase or a tryout, the first thing we're going to do is they're going to run a 60-yard dash. And it just doesn't tell the whole story. Some kids are sprinters, they don't have the top speed, and then some have that top speed, but they can't steal bases during the game because they don't have that explosive speed. So going off that, Sean, what is something you like to do with your athletes? You just mentioned you did a baseline test. So now kind of what is the plan that you're going to build together and put together for these guys to continue to work on for the next 2 months? How do you go about that process?
Yeah, absolutely. So, in grad school and undergrad, obviously with, the exercise science and the sports management, degrees and the focus that I had at South, they would drill this into you constantly. And you're probably going to know exactly what I'm going to say. They would say the only two ways to increase speed is stride length and stride frequency. And they would talk about that all the time, which is obviously true. Research has backed that up a lot. But the big thing is, how do we do that? How do we increase those two things? But also another thing, for us, we are trying to train speed in three ways, essentially. And a lot of people don't like hearing this, but like the foundation of all athletic qualities is strength. There has to be some base level of strength, specifically relative strength, which is, your strength in relative to your body weight, pull-up ability and so forth, which this is a fun fact. I'll kind of touch on this, that, you increase your pull-ups and you get stronger at pull-ups, you actually will increase your sprint speed. That is something that a lot of people don't know. And that's a lot of research I looked into, and I started testing it with guys, and a lot of it's about fast twitch, muscle fibers and so forth. And when I was a strength coach at Westfield High School, which is a small school outside, well, not really small anymore, but it's outside of Indianapolis, where Grand Park is, we would do pull-up testing all the time. And every time we do those tests, we would see the guys that did a lot more pull-ups would be the highest at their pro agility, highest at their 40-yard dash, 60-yard dash, all that stuff. But to kind of encompass and encapsulate what we do is we train for change of direction. So we want them to be able to cut, be explosive. We want to get as many Barry Sanders on the field as possible. We also train acceleration, which is something I think that is not trained enough. And then we also train for lower body strength and power exercises, which is a lot of strength sled work. And, we do some plyometrics as well, which would be power exercises for lower body. But I'm going to touch on a little bit on acceleration. So a lot of people will train for max end speed. And I was talking earlier about guys up here in North, they'll try to train on the treadmill and increase their top end speed. So their theory on increasing top end speed is if you increase your max output, which is your ability to sprint at the highest speed, your operational output is going to increase, which is true. So operational output would be like a football player running in pads on the field. Obviously, he would be faster without his pads on and everything if he was just in a t-shirt and shorts. That is true. However, a lot of guys don't understand that in sports, specifically in baseball, and what we train most guys a lot of is everything is spent on acceleration. We've got to get to top speed. We've got to get to and accelerate fast. And if you think about it, most sports, excluding football, when you guys get a breakaway, a running back's running for a touchdown, a kick return, so forth, you're spent in more time and change of direction and acceleration than you are in top end speed. So for me, my goal when we get guys is let's try to make sure that we are training them to accelerate as fast as possible. So we do a ton of 10-yard dashes. We do 10-yard dashes when they're in a good start, like a 40-yard dash start, or maybe we'll do a 60-yard dash start with a lot of baseball players. We'll do it lying down. We'll do an opening to the right. We'll do an opening to the left. We'll do it with mountain climber positions. We'll do it with split stance squat positions, split jump positions. We're trying to create lateral broad jumps. We're trying to create the most chaotic environment possible to try to, implement and recreate the game. The game is chaotic, right? We might get open up to try to catch a fly ball, get a bad jump, and then we have to clean up our footwork real quick, or learning to open up our hips and get our hips moving in the right direction. As you know, like if your hips aren't opening up, you ain't going to make a good route to a ball. And so my big thing is how can we increase everybody's acceleration? How can we help them with change of direction? And a lot of that starts with the hip hinge too. And a lot of guys, like if you watch DBs in football, that's a natural hip hinge position in the start. You watch guys playing basketball, natural hip hinge position. But there's a lot of guys at young ages. When I say young ages, anywhere between 8 years old all the way up to 15, 16 years old, they are very quad dominant in their movements. They get too much on their toes. They're not balanced. And so we really work on hip hinge with a double leg, but also in a single leg, and as you know, like single leg hip hinges is a whole nother ball game. And we're spent on one foot or transferring force from one foot to the other a lot. So being able to make sure you're using your posterior chain and, using your glutes, using your hamstrings is such a vital part of that process of speed. So we throw in a lot of strength exercises, a lot of training exercises in there, but we also focus on those two things as well. But kind of what do you guys do, Adam? I know obviously with you being an explosive and fast guy, there's a lot of things that you really fell in love with growing up and kind of implemented with your guys. Kind of how do you guys do it at Heisler Heat?
Yeah, so a big part is we like to really live on the hills. I love the uphill sprints. We do those constantly. Try to get them 3 days a weekend. And it's all working, exploding up. So as fast as you can get up the hill and then walk your way down, take your time and your rest in between, and then exploding on up. So I think a lot of people getting confused when they're doing the hill sprints of they sprint up and then jog back, sprint up, jog back. And what we're not trying to train is we're not trying to kind of get you, we're getting you in shape, but we're not working this as a cardio exercise. We're working as an explosive exercise. So you need to take that proper time in between of each set, however long it takes you to get up that hill to reset the battery. So whenever you're getting ready to go again, we do a lot of the same sprint starts that you were just talking about. We had some last night. We had a kid, probably a body length in front of the other ones. They both start on the ground. When the first guy gets up, the second guy tries to chase him to go get him, just to work on that acceleration up off the ground as fast as possible. Adding in the single leg stuff. I think single leg stuff is something that doesn't get used enough. Obviously, we talk about it, but just for those that aren't listening, that we talk about whether it's in the high school program and say you're just squatting 2 to 3 times a week, add in the single leg lunges, reverse lunges, step ups, anything like that. And you're really going to learn how to build power in each one of your legs. And I think it's going to help keep you kind of healthy from that standpoint of where one's not dominant over the other one. You got to get them both strong. And with a guy that I dealt with a lot of hamstring injuries when I was playing, I don't think I did that kind of stuff enough, as well as working the posterior chain. Yep. I think there was some reasons I didn't do that. Was number one, I don't think it was as popular as it was back then, but also number two, I'm going to take accountability myself, is those things sucked.
Yeah.
and I hated them because, I mean, it was always, oh my gosh, these are killing my lower back, or these are killing my hamstrings. Well, really what it was telling me is my core is not strong enough and my posterior chains isn't strong enough. So I've got to strengthen those. And it wasn't until I went to a physical therapist here in town that basically told me that and said, if you want to keep dealing with these injuries, you're going to keep dealing with these unless you make some changes to your workouts, to your regimen, to your stretching routine, your mobility. And finally, I bought into it. And luckily, when I was playing professionally, I didn't have any hamstring injuries come up when I dealt with them all throughout college. But it's just diving in, doing more research, and we talk about it all the time, is being with somebody that you trust. And just because I was a fast guy doesn't mean I know the most about sprinting. It just means, yes, I did some things. I had some ability, natural ability, and then I kind of tapped into some others because I've mentioned before on the podcast, when I was 12 through 15, I was always an average to above average runner. I was never the fastest kid on my team. And it wasn't until I found the weight room and physically matured a little bit more to continue to get faster. And like I've told before, is the fastest I ever was my senior year of college, when I was weighing the most I ever was too. So now you got that misconception of putting on too much weight because you're going to actually slow down. Or you watch Sunday football every day, and these guys are 220 pounds and they run 4.3s for a reason. They're explosive athletes. So a lot of the stuff, the single leg, the different sprint starts, the uphill sprints, banded resistance sprints, have somebody pulling on you while you're working that good angle of your hip hinge and leaning into it, body lean, first step quickness of practice running the bases. I don't think that's another thing that a lot of guys won't use enough is, when you're running those bases, use it to create better angles. One guy I like to always point to, Derek Jeter. I don't think he was the fastest by any means, but he was a really, really good base runner because he made the cuts, the right angles. He had good body lean and body control when he hit the bases to get on to the next one. So we talk about it. Yes, the 60-yard time, unfortunately, we both agree isn't really a big part of baseball, but it's one of those things that you're going to have to do. So you might as well try to train to get really good at it, just to simply have that number on your resume. Because if there's a difference between a 6'8" runner and then a 7'6" runner, I promise you the guys are going to lean more towards that 6'8" guy, just because he's got explosive athleticism skills in there. Not necessarily as a better base runner, but he's going to have that explosiveness that maybe they can try to teach him how to do better things on the base pass. So those are kind of a couple of the things that we'll add into the routine just to try to really harp on speed and athleticism, box jumps, vertical jumps, broad jumps, like you mentioned. Anything where you're working that powerful hip hinge position, just like we talk about in hitting, it's the most powerful position your body can get into. So you need to train into that position. That way you're taking that over and putting it onto the field from that standpoint.
Yep. And it's funny you mentioned the hamstring injuries, and those happen a lot. When I was younger in high school, I used to get hamstring injuries all the time. And just for those that are listening, like, I would do leg curls only for my hamstrings in high school. And it was just like, it was back in the day, like, let's see here, it was 2001 to 2005. So leg curls was kind of what was taught. And it wasn't until I started learning more of the science and learning how to train in college, like, training the hamstring at the hip joint as well, and learning how to do RDLs, learning how to do stiff leg deadlifts. And once I started doing those, to this day, knock on wood, I still have not had a hamstring issue. And learning to train the hamstring at that hip joint too, and as opposed to just the knee joint doing leg curls. And for me, that was a game changer. It also helped with my speed and everything. But one thing that's funny is, we talk about the weight room and the importance of the weight room. And for those that are listening, like, yes, you do need to run to get faster. You have to sprint to get faster. You have to get better at sprint. You have to get better at change of direction. So you'll get faster that way. That's, the best way in a lot of ways. But also another best way, I would still say this is secondary in a lot of ways, unless you're a young athlete, this would be more primary, is the weight room and getting faster weight room. We've had guys that will increase 20 pounds of lean mass and their 60-yard dash or 40-yard dash or 10-yard dash is faster just by getting stronger in the weight room, which again goes back to my, the strength as a foundation of all athletic qualities. But what's funny is I remember, and this is something I started changing in my training. I remember when I was being taught how to program in strength and conditioning in grad school. And they were like, hey, you got your primary exercise, you do your bilateral squat, your box squat or deadlift, whatever. And then you do your one single leg, then you train your posterior chain, you get some abs in, and then boom, you're done. Right. The problem that I ran into is most guys, and this goes into, not to dog on football coaches, we talked about this before, but everybody thinks it needs to be squat, bench, clean, squat, bench, clean, squat, bench, clean. And it is, once I started doing unilateral training and doing 2 exercises for unilateral training. For instance, once I started doing, let's say after our main exercise of a box squat, say, we started doing Bulgarian split squats and then finished with some sled walks or, heavy ass sled drags or backward sled drags. Once I started having them train 2 different exercises after the main exercise, 2 assistance exercises, if you will, with unilateral work, it was a game changer. And what I started doing is I started trying to get a little bit more chaotic with things as well. Meaning we do a barbell, we'll do a dumbbell, we'll do a goblet, we'll do a single arm overhead single arm overhead with a kettlebell split squat to kind of create this chaotic, and you have to use your core environment. And once we started doing that, that was a real game changer, increase in speed in guys, but also not only that, but making them more athletic, making them more mobile. Cause that's another thing that's completely looked over is the mobility. Like you can't increase power, increase sprint speed if you physically can't get into a certain position. And that's something that we'll throw in. We have a 15-minute pre-warm up that we do that just, we had one guy showed up to speed camp last week, and I'm not to dog on him, but he threw up 5 times just after the warm up. And so he was not physically ready. He was not mentally or physically prepared for what he was about to do. But not to say that you're supposed to kill guys in the warm up, but you want to activate the CNS, get the blood pump and get the body warmed up. And so for those that are listening, parents are listening that want to sign kids up for speed camps and everything, hey, that's great and all, but make sure your kid is willing to do the work on his own too, because just showing up for a 2-month speed camp or working on speed every now and then, it's not going to cut it. And just like you were just saying, like, you have to be sub 7 if you want to compete at the Division I level. And a lot of guys, if you want to be, especially up the middle, you got to be, 6'7" better up the middle, like, second base, shortstop, and specifically mainly center fielder as well. I was the slowest guy in the outfield at South Alabama, and my best 60 was 6'7". I probably was chilling at 6'8" most of the time, but I was the slowest damn guy on the field, on the outfield, right? Yeah. So, and I was fast, I was explosive, I was athletic. I was also a bigger guy, so I understood that. But was it preventing me from trying to train to get faster? Hell no, I was still trying to get faster. But for those that are listening, you got to be aware of the athletes are at that next level. But I kind of wanted to touch on that because after you said that hamstring, it really clicked in my head, and it just shows the importance, like you said, of finding a strength coach that's smart, that's very intelligent, but also that you can trust. It's going to say, hey, our job first and foremost is to keep you healthy. But that's a really good point of hamstring injuries, because there's a lot of guys still to this day that get those injuries all the time.
Yeah, and you mentioned playing outfield at South Alabama. We had Coach Calvi on here. The outfield at South Alabama is 330 down the lines, 400 dead center. It's a major league size field. So we needed guys that could run. So that's why 4 of our outfielders were sub 6'7" or under. And so if you're thinking you're trying to play outfield at the college level, that's what you're going to have to go against and compete against. And these kids these days, Michael Sandel, he's their center fielder this year, just ran a 6.35 at their pro scout day 2 weeks ago. And I mean, I would have never even thought about doing anything like that. And now you're seeing that pop up these days, but it comes from these specialized training. And I mean, just like in anything in life, people are studying, we're learning more, and we're able to put that into works like you're doing with your athletes there in Indiana. One thing I want to hit on, Sean, is I see it a lot, and I think it kind of sells parents, but I almost kind of see it as like a gimmick from a standpoint of how to properly use the speed ladder. I see a lot of people that are thinking that they're using the speed ladder and they're using these cones and they're doing all these agilities and they're getting faster because of it. Can you really dive in deep on how that is kind of just to the eyes? It's just trying to appease you, making them look like they're tired, but maybe really not translating to power that they're producing to run that fast 60-yard dash time.
Absolutely. So let's start with the speed ladder is not making you faster, period. It's not making you more explosive, period. It's not helping you change direction, period. The speed ladder is good for warm up. It's good to help with footwork, teach coordination, kind of get some ability in the feet. But I'm going to give you an example. I boxed growing up. I played baseball, played basketball. I played 5 sports total growing up. I was a very good track runner. I was winning a lot of track meets, growing up. It's fast, athletic. I could jump rope like a fiend, still can jump rope really well. I boxed, had good footwork. I could have been better, obviously. I'm not saying I was the man. When I first started doing ladders, this is after doing all that stuff, I was really slow and kind of choppy, and my footwork wasn't very good. So, and I struggled with them. And specifically because I literally never did any ladders, I think, until it might have been my freshman year of college. I think it was my freshman year of college when I actually first started doing ladders. So I had the ability to be quick and athletic in the boxing ring, quick and athletic on the field. I stole, bases at Kokomo as a Kokomo high school baseball player, broke records in stealing bases, not to just pat on my back. So shameless plug on myself there. Right. So I did all that and I sucked. I sucked at ladders. I was horrible at ladders. So that shows you the correlation right there. And I wasn't afraid. Like, of course I wanted to be better at ladders, but you'd see some people that were good at them, specifically the football guys. And I didn't play football through high school, but the football guys were better at them because they had done them before. And so I see that stuff. And I also saw more athletic guys too. You remember Russell Harbin, that was at South Alabama for a little while. He didn't really do ladders too very well, but the dude was one of the most gifted athletes, that was ever at South when we were there. And so the big thing for me is when people see ladders or they see, and again, I will throw in that top end speed work on treadmills in Indiana. Like, that's cool. You're running a straight line fast on a treadmill. You're building up the speed, whatever. Like, people see that stuff, and that's a, $4,000 device. You don't need that shit to get faster and more explosive. Like, that's not how to get faster and more explosive. Your son would be better off instead of doing ladders, is working on some plyometrics, single leg plyometric hops into sprint work, stuff that's more correlated to the field. And name one sport, okay? Like, let's sit here and think about, name one sport that you're going to make these short, choppy steps inside of a square back and forth. And these are preordained, like the ladder's lined up, so we know exactly where we're going. There's no sport where you know exactly where the steps need to be, how short and choppy they need to be. It's not realistic. It doesn't carry over. I'm gonna be honest with you, I never do ladders because of that reason. I like doing cones instead, to where you're sprinting, lateral shuffle, sprint, lateral shuffle, and kind of making things crazy, like figure eight work, clover leaf work with cones, where your foot works a little bit quicker. That to me is where we're making it more realistic to the field, because that is, to me, when I see that, it's just eyewash. It's just it's disgusting to me watching guys like, hey, we're getting faster, explosive on ladders. Like, no, you're not, dude. Like, you're teaching these guys to make short, choppy steps and get a little bit more coordinated foot-eye coordination, a little bit more. Basically, to me, it's rhythm inside of a bunch of squares is all it is.
It reminds me of dancing. If you're going to correlate it to anything, that's what it correlates to, is dancing. That's it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. 100% agree with that. Like, and that's the thing, is like, I could spend, an hour doing footwork, athletic drills inside of a ladder. I'm not going to get faster from that. I might get a little bit more coordinated with that. And then to go on to my story on my shameless plug earlier, I started doing those ladders and getting better at them. I didn't get any faster on the field after I started getting better at those. So there was no correlation. And that's the thing. Like, everything right now it's science right now. And the thing about science is, like, it'll show us like what you're not good at and what you need to improve. But the one thing about science, and people say everything we're trained back by data, it doesn't really show us what we need to do to get better at it, right? It's just showing us what works and what doesn't work a lot of times, what you need to do better, what you need to improve. But that, to me, is a perfect example of, we do ladders, or I've done ladders with guys a long time ago, just for footwork back in when I was working at Westfield, because the football coach liked him. Mm-hmm. And I had the same conversations with him, like, dude, like, this isn't making your guys faster. It's good for warm up. So the kind of our agreement was, hey, okay, we'll do the ladders for warm up, kind of get their blood flowing, get their ankles, get their mobility, stuff like that. Then we'll get into the real speed from there. So that was a great question right there, man.
Yeah, I just see it all the time on social media popping up where, hey, our boys are working, we're out here getting it on the ladder. And then I'm thinking to myself, and you brought up a great point of, when is it ever going to be in a straight line correlation? You know exactly what's going to happen every time. No, there's nothing like that. So I was glad that you're able to hit on that. One more thing, Sean, I want to hit on is, when would you request? So I know some guys, and I think even one of my last years playing, I had a guy write a program for me, and he would have me sprint before I did my big workout. So literally I would show up, get through my old mobility and everything from that standpoint, do my sprints in that day, or my explosive movements, if it's box jumps or if it's the sprints, and then jump into the heavy squats or the heavy single leg, and then finish off with the accessories from there. What would you kind of recommend if you're trying to have a sprint program go on, but also have a workout program going at the same time?
So this, in the street league conditioning community, is something that guys will talk trash about toward each other all the time. And so the way you're taught in school and education and books by coaches is, you want to do your explosive movements first, because you want to be fresh for your explosive movements, which I agree with 100%. And then you do your heavy movements and that stuff. Mm-hmm. But there's a strength and conditioning coach for the Carolina Panthers, Joe Ken. I'm not sure if he's still there. And he asked this question one time. I heard him ask this, and he goes, "You're still supposed to be explosive in the fourth quarter, right?" He goes, "You're fatigued in the fourth quarter. So why would you not train to be explosive or train fast when you're tired?" And that, when I heard him say that, I was like, a light bulb went off. I'm like, oh my God. Now, so let's break this down a little bit. So do I want to train in an alactic state? Do I want to train fatigue? And what I mean by that for people that are listening is like Kit, our coach at college, love him to death, right? He would do conditioning, and we would just be, wanting to throw up, huffing and puffing. And in his eyes, and this is a lot of old school coaches' eyes, that was speed training. Conditioning has its place with people, but if you want to train to get more explosive, you need to be in an alactic environment. You can't have that lactic acid buildup. It can't be a fatigue. So saying that, and to answer your question, if I'm going to organize a strength and conditioning program, I am going to do our max effort acceleration speed when we're not fatigued. So if I want to work on, if Adam Heisler shows up, Adam Heisler's running a 6.560 and is like, dude, I want to run a 6.4, 6.3, 60. We're going to train that guy to be explosive, not fatigued. So we're going to work on his 10-yard dashes. We're going to work on all that stuff where he's fresh. And that's the big thing people need to pay attention to, is fresh. Plenty of rest. So, and I mentioned this before, this was a long time ago when we first started the podcast, is, if you're doing your sprint work, make sure you're getting adequate rest periods. So like if we're working on a 60-yard dash, you're slowly walking back to the start line, and it might take you 2, 3 full minutes to kind of get completely rested until you start that next sprint. Because that's one thing that people realize is, if you're fatigued, if you're tired, you're teaching your body to train and be slow. You can't train explosively from there. So if I'm running a strength and conditioning program, like we lift 3 times a week at Laird's Training. So we'll do a heavy lower, heavy upper, and a total body explosive strongman day. We also will throw in speed work. So we'll do a lot of speed work, and we essentially will do plyos and a little bit of sprint work at the beginning of every single lift. So we'll do that at every single lift. We'll do some plyo jumps as well. But we also will train at the end. So if I'm doing, say if you're like, hey, I want to train for acceleration and speed work, we're going to do that the day before, or like you said, before your lift. So if you lifted on Monday, I would do that sprint and explosive work on Sunday, your acceleration training on Sunday. If you're stuck and you can't do that, I would do that earlier in the day, optimally on Monday, and then do your leg lift later in the day. And that's one thing, is like, there's no perfect way to do it, but the way that I used to do it, if you're doing a 4-day plan, is we would do our sprint work on upper body days, and then we would do our more ab and conditioning type stuff on lower body days. What I mean by conditioning is not necessarily running, more sled work from there. But we want to try to do that training. If you're in a 4-day split, do your sprint work either on, if you're doing like Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday lifting, do your speed work on, if you're lifting upper body on Monday, do it on Monday and Thursday, or Monday and Wednesday where you're fresher. And then you could do your lifting and focus just on your legs on the other days. For us, I like doing a little bit of it every single day at the beginning, and then I like doing it at the end. So like I was saying before, we do the stuff in the beginning. At the very end, we will do usually sled finishers twice a week. So sometimes we'll do explosive sprints at the end of a workout. Sometimes we're doing heavy sled pushes, just working on power control and working on teaching these guys proper acceleration, positive shin angle, working on the knee drive forward and the bottom half coming forward. But I want them to train when they're tired, try to train to be fast, and we still give them adequate rest period when they're tired. So when I say that is, say we do a whole entire workout, and legs are a little tired, we might have 2 minutes of rest, a little bit of stretching before we get everybody together and we do this sled sprint complex at the end. And from what I've seen, and what I've known doing this all these years, we just had Tommy Summer, IU's Friday night pitcher, increase his velocity and being able to maintain his velocity later in the game when he was playing summer ball this past year, just by implementing those exercise, those explosive sled sprints or explosive sled drags at the very end of the workout. And it was, what he noticed is in that 5th, 6th, 7th inning, he wasn't getting tired in his legs anymore. And it's also a mental part of the game too. Like, you're training to be explosive. You're still trying to be explosive when you're tired. That's a big deal. Whereas if I just had Tommy and these other guys just train to be explosive at the beginning of the workout, and then they just killed their legs and everything, they left, I know that they wouldn't be able to continue that anaerobic output, that explosive pitch after pitch later in the game. So that's one thing that I really learned. That's a really good question. I could literally talk about that, as you can tell, for like an hour about how to handle it. But what best way I can explain to it is, if you're trying to get faster, do it when you're not fatigued. Train when you're not fatigued. Train it when you're not after your leg lift. And when I say, train to be fatigued, don't do that all the time, because obviously if you're doing that nonstop, you will get slower. If as a strength coach and as a guy that's watching, if you see your guy sprinting and doing stuff and you see him going like slow, just nip it in the bud right there. Like, you don't need to be having them trained to be slow. And there's a lot of ways to do it. You can still do kettlebell swings, single arm kettlebell swings, to still try to train that hip hinge, that triple extension, to be explosive faster there too. That's kind of a long-winded answer, but that's it's really good for it. A really good question for people to hear, because a lot of people will do conditioning and they'll do stuff after their leg days, or even after upper body days when their legs are still sore from the day before. And the coach is like, yeah, we're getting speed work in. Nah, not really, man. You're just training to be slow right now.
Yeah, and I remember, I think I was watching a spring training game. This was 10 years ago, and Roy Halladay, when he was one of the best pitchers in the game, had talked about during spring training when he throws his bullpens, he does them after heavy leg days, like literally 30 minutes to an hour later, because he wants to feel like he is in the seventh inning trying to get through that bullpen there. So that was a cool point of, I'm sure he didn't do that all the time, but he would add that into his routine to help him link to himself and know how to work when he is tired. So you did a great job breaking that down and answering that. So another question I want to ask too is, all right, so say Sean Laird's a Division I baseball coach. Can you, number one, express how important it is that you and the strength coach are on the same page? And then also how, if you're doing conditioning, are you letting your strength coach handle that in the weight room on his own? Or are you doing the, hey, after practice is over, we're going to hang around, we're going to run poles, we're going to do laps, we're going to do base running? What would you do if you were running it your way?
Absolutely. So, and you and I both know our experience. Not gonna, shame anybody or anything like that, but I would be putting the strength coach in charge of all that work. As a baseball coach, we're focused on sports specificity. So I want my guys the pitchers to work on their bullpens, work on their pitches, PFP work. The outfielders, I mean, we ran all the time as outfielders already, and fielding fly balls, whatever. And then it was when it was infield defense work and rundowns, guess who was running? We were running, right? So we're getting all that specific work as outfielders. I don't see a need as baseball coaches to run the hell out of your guys at the end of practice. It doesn't make any sense to me. Now, if you're working on base run, you're working on turns, you're working on decelerating after you touch first base. Yeah, that's a part of the game. I don't have a problem with that, but it shouldn't be a daily thing. Like, you shouldn't be beating the hell out of your guys as a baseball coach, specifically at the Division I level. So if I'm a baseball coach at the Division I level, I'm focused on what I can control in between the lines. I'm not focused on the strength and conditioning. I'm not focused on the speed and development. For example, we did some hill sprints back at South, and our coaches were running this. And I don't know if you remember this. This was our senior year, and we started doing these hill sprints. And I'm like, all right, I'm gonna bust ass. I'm gonna kick ass and take names with this. So I was sprinting as hard as I could for 10 hill sprints. This was right when we came back from summer, and so I was like, yeah, let's kick ass and take names. And I was doing really well. I was right behind our buddy Clint a lot of times. And my long legs on the hills, I could beat him sometimes on the acceleration. So I was really pumped. And obviously, for those who don't listen, Clint was like a 6'5" runner at South. And then all of a sudden, they're like, hey, go run and touch around the stadium. Go run and touch the clubhouse. I'm like, what? Like, what are you talking about? And so we did that like 5 times. And they're like, back on the hills. And so I gave everything I could into those hill sprints, and I was in pretty good shape. I mean, we trained that summer a lot together, the sledgehammer swings and stuff. So I was in really good shape there, and I'm dog ass tired. Like, I look like a 500-pound dude eating Twinkies. Like, I was so tired. And so at the end of it, coach is like, I'm not gonna say who it was, is like, man, you guys are out of shape. You're sitting there dogging. And he was looking right at me, and I'm like, dude, I will knock you out if you think you're talking about me. But all jokes aside, like, I looked like absolute trash because I gave everything I got. But that's a perfect example of like conditioning. I understand high school guys specifically. When high school guys in Indiana in January, they'll do conditioning to kind of weed out the weak-minded guys, the guys that don't want to put in the work. I understand that completely. Conditioning has its place. if you're going to condition, you need to communicate with your guys that this is a conditioning day. We're going to beat the hell out of you. Okay. Mm-hmm. And if you're a baseball coach and you want to do that, you need to let your strength coach know. So he's not that later that night. It's like, hey, all right, we got 3 rep max on box squats tonight. So I know you guys just ran 15 miles with a bunch of Marines. So we're going to get after this. No, I that's one thing we got to understand. And so like, as a baseball coach, a lot of guys will try to do everything all at once. Mm-hmm. And you can't do that. Just control between the lines. Let the strength coach do it, because there's a lot of things that go involved with speed work, high-low programming. Guys are going to be tired a lot of times. So the effort, the speed work that you might do on a certain day when the guy's legs are tired is going to be a little bit different. So I mean, that was a phenomenal question, because there's a lot of baseball coaches not on the same page with strength coaches, and they have to be on the same page in order to maximize the development. Because at the end of the day, in college baseball, the goal should be, obviously you want to win ball games 100%, but you should be trying to develop your young players into men, but also into better athletes. Because if they're better athletes, it makes your program better, makes them better, helps them move on to the professional levels. And so you've got to be on the same page, and coaches should not, I don't pretend to be a lawyer. I don't pretend to be a basketball coach. I don't believe that baseball coaches, if they don't have the knowledge base, should pretend to be speed coaches. That's just my 2 cents in that whole thing.
No, you did a great job of breaking that down. I think, and you hit the nail on the head when you talked about you spent all your energy on those hill sprints thinking that's all you had, and then you had nothing left in the tank. Mm-hmm. Whereas so I go back to my high school practices. If we knew we were going to have condition at the end of the practice, I can honestly say myself as well as our teammates, towards the end of practice, we weren't trying as hard to run down those fly balls when we're doing outfield work, because we know we have to save our legs to go through the conditioning phase, whether it's triangles or sprint poles or Indian run, whatever it is going on from that standpoint. So it kind of defeats the whole purpose, because everybody's so worried about that damn conditioning test coming up that they don't go full speed to get to it because they're trying to save themselves. So I think you saying that if you know you have a conditioning going into it, you need to let the whole team know, and you need to let the strength coach know, and you better not expect much going on at practice, because this is what your focus is that day. And so, and I think communication, like we've always talked about on here before, is just the biggest key to everything in life, just like it is from this standpoint. The strength and conditioning coach is a strength and conditioning coach for a reason. Let him handle that stuff there, and you focus on the baseball aspects of things, and y'all work together as opposed to pulling each other apart. Hey, why aren't my guys getting bigger, faster, stronger? Well, hey, you're kicking their ass at practice. That's why they're not getting bigger, faster, stronger in the weight room, because you're having 4-hour practices. Mm-hmm. And one props to Calvi when he first came in, the thing he cut in half was they practice for an hour and a half, 2 hours, but it's full speed. There's never wasted time. Outfielders, you're getting your conditioning work in, tracking fly balls down. You're getting your work in when you're doing base running during BP, like that. They don't have to do that extra stuff after practice because they're getting that stuff in during the full practice. So I think people are starting to become more aware of that. And I think Mercer does a great job when he broke down how they kind of run things there. And he said, heart and soul, he has the strength and conditioning kind of background as a hitter's background, where he's going to be in control and kind of give some tidbits here and there. But I think ultimately when it comes down to how we're going to condition these guys, he's going to let that strength staff handle that aspect going forward, just to make sure he gets the most out of the performance standpoint on the field.
Absolutely, man. And for those that are listening, like, I'm not dogging on coaches or my former coaches. Like, they all meant well. Like, when they implement that stuff, they think that they're helping you. Like, and I would believe that 99% of coaches are trying to help their guys. But I will say this is, like, especially right now, coaches are like, dude, you're like 20 pounds or 30 pounds underweight, man. You need to gain that weight. And they proceed to run their guys for 4 miles. Like, that's not going to help. You put them in a catabolic state really quickly. But man, that was I didn't even think about asking that question. That was really good to ask that, because there's a lot of people that need to hear that stuff, and that aspect of things. But one thing I kind of, and this has been a great episode so far, before we kind of close out, Adam, what's your advice to parents that want to come in to do some speed training at Heisler Heat, or if they were trying to go to LT, or just trying to go get speed training somewhere? They don't really know anything about it. They just think, hey, I need to get faster. So they don't pay attention to the strength world. They just like, hey, I need to find this guy that does speed and agility, and I need to do everything private. He needs to do one-on-one training, all this stuff. What's your advice to those parents that are kind of out of the loop when it comes to the strength conditioning world and speed and agility world? Like, what would you tell them? What conversation would you have with them?
I think first off, you have to set the expectations and don't let them know right away. And I think people run into problems of, hey, if you come train with me, I'm going to get your son 5/10 off his 60-yard dash time, guaranteed within 6 weeks, blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
And that may sound great and grandy, but I promise you, you can't guarantee that because you don't know the work ethic that's going to go into it. You don't know anything about the kid. What's his nutrition like? What's his sleep like? All that other stuff that's accountable when you're trying to really knock off the tents to that standpoint. So number one, it would be you have to go somewhere that's going to do a baseline test. I love that you mentioned you did that. Is you're going to see where they're at. This is their right now. This is what they are. This is what they're blessed with. This is what they are before they even ever attack strength and conditioning. So now you get a true baseline test of where are we going to make these improvements? So you can go back to the parent within 5 weeks or 6 weeks and say, this is where they improve. Now, how did they get there? This is the map of how we're going to go to get there. It's going to be a full breakdown of your speed, your mobility, your strength days, and it goes back to the communications of having all this set up. And with you being as organized as you are, I know you have all this printed out, your documents, you have your Google Sheets, and you're ready to go. It's not one of these, come do a baseline test, and then I'm just going to, you'll show up, and once you get here, I'll just come up with a workout on top of my head for 15 minutes. Because we've been at places like that where you'll show up and you're like, hey, what are we doing today? Hold on, let me head back to the whiteboard. And he just writes down 5 exercises and all right, get after it. And I think a lot of times parents get kind of blindsided by the eyewash stuff, which you mentioned with the ladders of, man, my son looks really tired. He must be getting better. Well, just because you're getting really tired doesn't mean you're getting better at all. You might not even be getting faster. You could actually be hurting yourself more than help yourself. So our goal isn't just when they leave, we want them to be tired, breaking a sweat, and they had a good workout, but it's not like I'm trying to run these guys into the ground so their parents know that you're paying for drill sergeant training, because that's not what we're doing. We're in the process of, I love that you hit on earlier, is if you're not feeling it that day and you're running your sprints, just kill it right there and go do something else, because you're not going to get any benefits out of that. You may injure yourself, but you're definitely not training your fast twitch fibers. You're actually slower than when you really are. So you need to go on those full days when you're fully recovered, ready to go. So I think more than anything is just go back to doing your research, have somebody in mind, talk to people, ask them what their plan is. I think one thing a lot of parents won't do is just sit down with us and have a conversation of like, what is the plan and how are you going to help get my son to that position from your standpoint? Not saying it's on us to actually get them there. We're going to do our best to get them there, but they have to put in the work from that standpoint. So I think more than anything is just the communication, the key, is my son putting in the extra effort? Is he showing up on time? Is he showing up to do the prehab movements, or is he just show up to do the workouts? Because I think we've noticed sometimes is some guys will skip that 15-minute warm up because, like you mentioned before, it gets you going, it gets your blood pumping, and is getting you in shape as well as getting you warm, ready to attack that killer workout. Man, that thing sucks. I don't want to show up for that. I'm just going to show up when we just start doing squats. You're not getting the whole benefit out of this program here. And the last thing that we're going to put on is there's a price on this for a reason. It's because Sean believes in what he's doing. He believes he's the best at what he's doing. So he's going to put a price on it. You can like it or you cannot like it. But I promise you, when you make that investment into it, you're going to see some really good results out of it, as long as your kid's showing up and being accountable. And I know if you're training at LT, you're going to be held accountable. There's not going to be any choice, or either you're going to get out of the program because he's not going to keep you around. So I think more than anything is you make this investment. You understand you've done your research. Now it's trust Sean or trust myself that this is what we're going to do to help get your son faster.
Absolutely. And you hit the nail on the head there, man, of trusting the process and understanding, because it's not fast. Like, you're not going to turn into Mike Trout, like in 5 lessons, just like you're not going to become Usain Bolt after just doing one speed camp. It's something it's a long process. And I remember I've had a million conversations with dads about this. And I remember a couple of conversations specifically is like, well, how does he get faster? And I'm like, dude, he's doing what he needs to do to get faster. And he just needs to do it consistently. He needs to make sure that he's taking care of himself, his sleep, nutrition, all that stuff, because that plays into a factor, and be able to put maximum effort into the next day. It's not going to happen overnight. It takes time. And one of my LT guys, Braden Erb, he's one of the all-state, all-American wrestlers and all-American football players. He's a big guy, wrestles at heavyweight, but the dude's fast. The dude's explosive. Could he be better? Absolutely, yes. But that was something that he worked on constantly in order to do that. It's not something all of a sudden like 8 weeks and then poof, you're done. Just like when guys will do strength and conditioning in the off season for baseball, and then season starts and they just stop. It's like, dude, what are you doing? Like, it's like building a house and then not putting a roof on. Like, what are you doing? Like, you got to take care of the house. But absolutely, man, good stuff right here. Was there anything else you want to jump in and add until before we close out?
No, I think we covered a lot of good stuff today, and it's good. We never got to do one about this kind of stuff, and it's such a big part of. We get questions about it. Players are questioning us. The parents are, the coaches. So I think we did a really good job of breaking down just kind of how to attack this plan going forward for those that don't know. And there's a lot of us that think there's a magical pill that if I take this, my son's going to run a 6.560. And I just love that you were able to break down right there that it takes time. So put in the work, but it takes time. Don't expect the quick results right away.
Absolutely, guys. Well, yeah, if you guys enjoyed this and you want us to dive into more depth about, whether it's a 60-yard dash for baseball players or exactly how we break down our speed, just holler at us and we'll break things down some more. That any episode that you guys like, if you want us to dive deeper into, we will definitely do that and kind of go from there. But if you guys like this episode, make sure you guys leave that 5-star review. And until next time, we'll see you guys later.